So, yes, hello everyone. Today we are here with another yet powerful session. It's a virtual book launch of Fairy Tales by Dr. Mahad Qureshi, and he is a very awesome and fabulous person as well as writer. The author is a practicing medical doctor by profession and born to a military family with a literary heritage, which just made him to write something which is inside him so many years. So it's like book is always a special and precious thing for any person, a writer or a reader. And when it comes to like publishing and presenting to people, so every person becomes more curious and more careful about it. And when you are talking about so many different um, stories and try to combine so many different stories somewhere somehow, there are a few based on true events as well. So that means you are going to put something very powerful on paper and going to present people, and you want people to connect with it. So the book is a collection of short stories which the writer has written over a period of few years. Each story represents an emotionally touching incident that left the writer pondering on a new aspect or of reality of life. As the writer uh, matured with time, I think the stories as well, and that's why here we are going to represent the story. So I guess this is the enough of the introduction for the book and about the writer. Now we should go to the Dr. Mahid and talk about him, that how he started working on it, and what was the purpose behind, and let's know the everything from him. So, Dr. Mahid, even though you are a professional doctor, and still, what inspired you to write a fictional book and enter into the literary world? Even you are somewhere linked with a literary heritage too. So, we would like to know your side of the story.
Well, thank you very much, madam, for the extravagant and humbling introduction. Before I come directly to your question, I'd like to take liberty to thank the senior panelists who have joined our virtual platform for the virtual book launch. I am extremely grateful to Professor Modat Hussain Rana for taking out time out of his busy schedule and honor us by his presence here today. Many people don't know that my connection with Professor Modat is way back in the years if I trace it down. And I remember being a third year medical student, quite a junior one, sitting towards the very end of the hall. I was witnessing a medical seminar, and the keynote was to be given by Professor Modat Hussain Rana. And as he talked about, the whole seminar and advancements in science and everything, I saw a man that I wanted to speak like and carry myself like when I grew up to be somebody, I kind of believed that he had somehow cracked the code to greatness. And when he was going back to his car after the seminar, I was uncultured enough to stop him in his tracks, distract him a bit, and ask him a question that I used to put in front of very few selected chosen people who kind of inspired me through the years. And I asked him, sir, that what did you do differently when you were a nobody like me to achieve the position that you are at today? And I still remember that he was very generous enough to drop in an advice, and he said, "Sincerity of the heart, Mahad, sincerity of the heart." I keep that advice, sir, very close to my heart every day when I go to work, in life in general as well. I'm really grateful to you for taking me under your wing as we entered the final phases of publishing the book. And then again, grateful to you for joining us today as well. I'm very grateful to Dr. Sama bin Zubair as well, who's been just like an elder brother to me, guided me throughout the process, and supported me wherever I needed his support. I'm grateful to you as well, sir, for joining today. So, moving on to your question, madam, when did I start writing basically? So, if I could trace it back down the memory lane, I believe creative writing was something that I kind of enjoyed. It was something that I was good at as well. But then again, it was just for the sake of assignments or homeworks, or whenever we had to do it, that is when we did it. It wasn't something that I would take out time as a hobby to pursue, or take it on a serious note. But then again, as I grew up, I would see my grandfather. He was an author of multiple books. मुशायरे भी होते थे घरों पे, किताबों की रुनमाई भी होती थी. तो I still remember as a little one, किताब की रुनमाई हुई तो he came to present the book to me as well. At that time, I did not know that this is something big. It was just an event for us kids to play at. But with time, I kind of started to enjoy creative writing, and I started to have explore the possibility of writing for the sake of a hobby, or maybe on a serious note, try to compile a book maybe. The genes were always there. It took some time for them to mature. They were dormant initially. But then again, I think I'm grateful to my parents and to my grandparents for kind of giving me the genes related to literature. दो गिला है कि शायरी के जीन्स नहीं आ सके मेरे में. So the genes that I got were only related to short story writing and Afsana Nigari. So with time, I started to write short stories. They kind of made their way into college magazines, university magazines. And eventually, when I graduated as a doctor, I kept on writing, and eventually, I had a collection of 6 to 8 stories. I got in touch with the publishers, and they said that you need to just increase the count a little bit to compile them in a book. And that is how we got into writing.
So, well, it's I believe that's inspiring because not everyone is that much lucky to have someone who is there to guide him. I know there are a lot of people who don't have any literary background in their family, but still they love to write. They still love to read, and they struggle a lot to find one that humble person who can support him or her to begin that journey and stay with them throughout that
Well,
phase.
this is quite an important point that you just mentioned. You
Yes.
see, when writers kind of publish their books, their work, or let's say anybody in life achieves anything, it kind of feels to him as if he's done something big. But when you analyze it in retrospect, you see that there are multiple people, who've put in their work. They've sacrificed something that they had for you to achieve the success that you eventually had. So I would also like to thank all those people who actually guided me throughout the process, rather made me capable enough to have the ability to write, author, and eventually have this book as in the form of buried tales as we have. I'm grateful to my parents who basically nurtured the gift within the gift, as Professor Modat wrote in his foreword. I'm grateful to my in-laws for the support as well, and to my grandparents for giving me the genes related to literature, and to my dear wife as well, who's been a wonderful support throughout the process. She's been the first one to basically read uh, any story that I wrote. She would give me her feedback, and as the senior lot, in the panel might agree, okay, when it comes to the husband, wives are pretty good critics. So I was able to take advantage of that ability of her to, kind of further improve my writing by taking into account her criticism of the stories.
So, Doctor, you are really very lucky. You have so many people to encourage you, motivate you, and improvise your work as well. So, if we talk about now about the Tales, so as you mentioned, and we know that a book is the collection of so many short stories. So, definitely, every story must have a message and a powerful background. But is there one particular story that inspired you or which is inspired by a real incident?
Well, madam, as you introduced in the introduction regarding the book, that each story that has been written in this book represents an emotional happening somewhere in the past that the writer has experienced himself directly, or he has witnessed it or heard from someone. And then, of course, it has been changed with a tinge of fiction, and the plot has been constructed around that central theme to eventually make the story that there is. So every story actually is inspired by true life events. And if you ask me which one of them is very close to my heart or my favorite, it's very difficult to pick and choose. but I believe the broken sword is something that is very close to my heart. It's kind of moves me to the core every time I read it, and I believe a cogwheel, nonetheless. That is the last story of the book, is also, um, you know, very thought provoking.
All right, all right. So okay, Sarasama is back now. So let's move to our panelists today and let's discuss and get their reviews about the book. So first we will talk with you, Sir Mohit. So you first of all, as Dr. Mahit said, that we also appreciate your efforts and that you worked and showed a path to him and help him to become a writer. As a person belong to a publishing industry, and I am a writer as well, so I know how much it is important if there is someone backing you and supporting you. So on the behalf of, I believe that from the entire industry of Pakistan, I thank you so much for introducing another author, emerging person, emerging writer in our industry. So thank you so much. We need such more people who support literature and literary industry or of society. So thank you for joining us today as well.
My pleasure.
So my first question to you, sir, that what do you find interesting and inspiring in this book?
Well, I think you reach to the book often through the author if you're lucky. And but you see, most readers reach to the author later. They enjoy the book earlier. So I think I'm one of those lucky ones who met the author first and then read the book. So it's a great privilege and honor, and it is not. Uh, I think that the credit is certainly not mine. It is essentially Mahad's own effort and intensity, which is expressed in these short stories. And I'm sure when we first met, and since then, our subsequent meetings in my clinic alongside with his charming wife, who's, I'm sure, a great inspiration in his life and a great support in his life. When he was thanking everybody, I was keeping my fingers crossed. I hope he says my wife too, because he had mentioned everybody under the sun, starting from me. And so I was praying for his, for his own goodness that he does mention, Dr. Saiba, and which he did, thankfully. So I think when I met Mahad, I knew what the stories would be like. When you I don't know whether you've had the pleasure of meeting Mahad or not. You see this particular phrase that I left with Mahad is something that I truly believe in, and I would have said it to hundreds of people that I've come across in life. When you meet Mahad, he kind of effuses sincerity. When you meet him, you meet a person who says things that he means, which is a very rare quality. Most of the time, when people are talking to you, they usually talk from around here. But when you listen to Mahad and you meet him and you sit there as a psychiatrist watching him speak, you get this feeling that he has this amazing combination of heart and head in his conversation. And he puts both of them beautifully, gels both of those qualities of head and heart together in his conversation and in his demeanor, in his character, in his personality. So I knew already that the buried stories that he's going to talk about are buried in this particular person. So they would be basically about messages which are to do with sincerity of heart. Nearly every story that I subsequently read when he shared the draft with me actually has this streak going through. It is about sincerity. Sometimes sincerity to your profession, sometimes sincerity in relationships, sometimes sincerity in terms of bonds that you make with other people. The second most beautiful thing that I don't know whether Mahad has felt that or done that consciously or not, is that his own name, Mahad, actually, um, if also spills into the stories that he tells. Mahad, I'm sure most of our audience would already know, a more commonly used name in our society is Mahdi, and Mahad is the shorter form of Mahdi. The Mahdi is somebody who preaches sincerity, who brings good luck, who brings charm to life, who believes in equity, who's a deliverer of goodness in times. And Mahdi, the ultimate Mahdi, the 12th Imam, is the deliverer of equity and justice to the world. So he in his stories actually his name spills into those stories characters somewhere all the time, and you can see this characteristic of Mahad as the deliverer of equity and justice and passion and goodness in the characters all around. So and then I have been into literature from very early life. I was not as fortunate as Mahad is in terms of his genes, in that he was born to writers and poets, and he had that genetic material coming into him in his DNA. My mother was a complete illiterate, a traumatized woman from 1947's tragedies. Um, and my father was no writer too, but I was an avid reader, and I used to read short stories a lot. So I started to probably read short stories when I was just 8 or 9 years old. So since then, I've always felt that the short stories that people compile eventually are separate text. So one short story, even if it is Sardas and Manto's short stories or Prem Chand's short stories, they're all separate stories that are not linked with each other in a compilation. But surprisingly, when I read Mahad's work, I felt this string passing through of a question that is raised in one story is answered in another. Whether it's a conscious effort by Mahad is something that you can ask Mahad about. But as a reader of those short stories, I picked that up. Uh, and those are very, very special questions that are asked by the characters. Uh, and and the answers that come are equally profound too. You know, those are questions that we often ask, but we do not really have any answers of. So at that tender age as a writer, to come up with that kind of maturity and understanding, if he has not planned it, then it is even more grand that he has not planned it and yet it is coming out. So his short stories are also like a ghazal. In one of our friends and mine and Usama's common friend, Dr. Sajid Rahim, is a great poet, and he writes a lot of beautiful ghazals. So when you see a ghazal, these are separate couplets, 8, 10, 12, whatever. Uh, but at a certain level, every ghazal has a mood, which fuses out of that ghazal. Although those couplets are not linked with each other apparently. So in many ways, Mahad's writing and this compilation of short stories is an English ghazal, where these short stories are connected in a very subtle way with each other, and then brings up this whole world of buried stories, which are sometimes buried in his DNA and his collective unconscious that he has brought out, and sometimes in his experiences, sometimes events that came into his life, and they triggered an emotional response within him, and then he had that in him to actually compile it and write. These are very, very powerful stories, and people who would get this book, I think, are going to enjoy the depth and intensity with which Mahad has written these stories.
Thank you so much, sir. I guess that's a very much important quality, a characteristic in an author, to be like humble and a person who is sensitive as well, who can feel what's going around and how people are like dealing with different emotions and situations and tragedies. So until unless you don't have that sensitive heart, I guess you can't be a writer. So it's a very much important characteristic to be a writer. And as you said that definitely there are a lot of people who don't have any person to guide them throughout any journey, or they don't have something in their genes to belong to the literary world. I am the person as well. So it just a pure love for the literature, or you can say something like you used to read to be because of an avid reader, you just jump into this industry. So I really enjoyed the whole background, the way you described it. It's truly amazing, and we definitely would like to read each and every story. So my another question to you. So
Sure.
actually, you already mentioned that, but now this time I want to know your perspective about a doctor who is who is an artist and in this field. How do you see the two different fields in one person? How do you
Mm,
feel this combination?
mm. I think this is a natural combination. You see, when you're a doctor, you're a scientist and an artist at the same time. You cannot truly be a doctor if you're just a scientist. You can be an engineer if you're just a scientist, or maybe a computer engineer or software engineer if you are a scientist. But for a doctor not to be an artist is impossible. So when I meet a doctor, I know that what he has done systematically through the system that has brought him up into in making him a doctor, that quality of art, fine art, sensitivity of an artist is buried in him. We systematically, through our training, through the curricular activities that we generate in the life of a doctor, we kill that artist in a doctor. Mahad is very lucky that he has been able to survive that system that kills the artist within the doctors. So everybody who becomes a doctor has that quality of art, quality of heart, quality of sensitivity, uh, looking deeper than the skin, going behind the picture and seeing the background in its entirety and depth, and see where is this coming from. So if you're a doctor by profession, you have to reach to the root of things. You cannot be superficial, and you cannot be just look at patients and people that you come across as if you are scanning them. No, you actually dig deep into them. And while you're digging, that the only way that somebody is going to let you in is uh, those qualities of heart, that quality of sincerity that knocks on the door of somebody's soul, and then he opens the door for you. If you were just a scientist, nobody is going to open up his inner world to you, and that will make you a very poor doctor. As a person, you would never really know the person you are treating. You then end up treating probably heart and kidney and liver and arm and bone and muscle, but you are never able to treat a person as a whole if you do not have the qualities of an artist. So I think Mahad has been fortunate in many ways. He has survived that test of the system that destroys the qualities of heart in doctors. And I hope and pray, and that is why I'm so inspired by Mahad. And we wanted him to go back to his alma mater, Army Medical College, and inspire other students to show them, look, this is how you can do it, and become a role model for medical students of Army Medical College, and where I'm sure all of them have those qualities of heart in them, and they're just looking for a role model like Mahad. You can still nurture uh, that artist within you, save that artist from the onslaught of science, if I may use that word. Seems as if I was anti-science. No, I'm not. But I do not believe in either or. I think it's the combination of the two that truly makes a great, good, sensible, sensitive doctor. So it's natural for and in the foreword that I wrote for Mahad, I said, we know how Pasternak describes Yivago and his poetry for Laura, and so that actually, that book beautifully depicts the qualities of a doctor. A doctor is a lover, doctor is an ashik, doctor is a sensitive soul, doctor is somebody who's there to fight alongside people as much as heal them simultaneously. So there are several. He's a soldier at one end also. He's a poet at another. He's a writer at another end. So doctors are people with multiple shades and qualities of human beings in them. And luckily, uh, this has given a chance to Mahad to actually resonate to uh, those qualities within him through these stories and bring out the artist that he is out for everybody to see now.
I second your thoughts, sir, because I believe that if a person who is a doctor, he is not that much sensitive, who can like go into the heart of a patient, how he can he will be able to heal someone. So that's important. So, and we know that Mahad sir is very much blessed. He is having a very sensitive heart because he is not only a doctor, a writer as well. So we can see how much emotions could be there in the book, and how many lessons we are going to, and how many messages we are going to have. So thank you so much for your answers and your input and insights for all the questions, sir. We are glad and humbled that you joined us today here. So
Pleasure.
moving forward to our another guest, Sir Usama. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we know you have a very busy schedule as well, but still, you honored us. So I'm going to pretty much straight, and my first question to you is that how do you see the Pakistani literature industry? So what do you think? Do you think I'm just going to combine two questions here? I think that will be more accurate. So do you think that fiction can help to boost the literary society of Pakistan? Doesn't matter it's in Urdu or in English.
You're mute, Osama.
Thank you so much for having me, and I could not say no to Mahad, but I said no to him just a couple of days ago. Okay, when Sir Rana is here, so I am not required at all. And otherwise, people may think it's some psychiatric book launch as two psychiatrists are, are present here. So don't stigmatize your book right from the beginning. But he insisted, so I joined, and I have no courage to speak as a panelist with Brigadier Rana. But as I'm here, so I have to answer your question. First of all, you used the word fiction industry, so it sounded like you were talking about some film industry, or maybe some cotton industry. So I would not use this word with fiction. So I usually don't agree to the people who say that everything is declining, and the literature in the past that was very much glorious, and now people are not writing anything good. So I usually don't agree to this notion. There's a new normal, and there's a a pattern of literature for every generation. And people say that people don't read books these days. So this is also a myth. I attend each and every literary festival happening in any part of the country. Last a couple of weeks ago, I was at Fez Festival, and they really had to close the doors during the Mushaira. That people were really dying to come in and listen to the poets, and the book stalls, they were like full. And Mahad also has told us that a lot of his books, they are already booked, and he has started sending them to the people. So it means that this literature industry is flourishing, and people are writing. So isme to there is no point. And when you talk about and when you limit it to Pakistani literature, I usually don't add more adjectives to literature. That it's Pakistani literature, or this is a literature produced by a doctor, or this is a literature produced by a military person. Literature is a piece of art, and but yes, when you limit it to this part of the world, so starting as Brigadier Rana took few names from Manto, and then Christian Chand, and when you talk of this part of the world, initially Kurato and Heather, she was staying here, so she had masterpieces. So it's this, the ball is still rolling. Brigadier Rana also named Colonel Sajid Rahim. He's writing wonderfully. I know a lot of other poets as well. So yes, this ball is rolling, and new people are coming. And you have seen Mahad's book, and I am in love with his first short story which he translated, and his choice of that story, emotion in that story. How could you depict that emotion uh, without taking assistance of either poetry or short story? And Mahad just had a regret that he didn't get the genes for poetry. Poetry is one of the most difficult forms of expression and literature. I would say after divine forms of expression, straight away comes the poetry. So Mahad is not that blessed, but he's this much blessed that he has written these stories. I won't use the word message, but they convey some emotion, they convey something, and what they convey is actually happening inside us. I usually Munir Niazi is one of my favorite poets, and I say what he does, he equates what is happening inside you and outside you. You feel that forest inside you, and you feel what is happening inside you in that forest. मकान में कह दे सदा की दहशत, मकान से बाहर ला मकान की दहशत. So he equates everything. And
वाह,
I felt same equation in
उसामा
a
दोबारा
Mother's Day.
खूबसूरत शेर है, प्लीज दोबारा पढ़िएगा.
Sir, मकान में कह दे सदा की दहशत, मकान से बाहर ला मकान की दहशत.
वाह.
So he equates that dahshat inside us and outside us. So Brigadier Rana told that his mother had a traumatic past from 1947. I had no such incident in my parents and in my grandparents, but still I feel some of my luggage is put there. All of us, and I feel so overwhelmed. I can go to US, I can go to UK, where nobody's like me, nobody speaks like me, but I cannot cross the border. And that emotion, that really hit my heart when I read his first story. So this is what a writer can do. He can make myself read what is going inside my head, which either I don't have time to read or I don't want to read. So he made me read that.
Thank you so much, sir. I think that's absolutely 100% right. The power of a writer is that he convinces the person or the reader to read what is there, what message is there, what he or she wants to share with the world. So, as we believe that, yes, with every passage of time, as the years are going, there are different stories are coming out. People have different pattern of sharing stories, and there are different ways of expressing themselves, like through any fiction, through poetry, through any travelogy, whatever it is. People are just there to share what they are experiencing and they have inside them. So that's a really wonderful thing. And to be an artist, this is the plus point, that you are allowed to share your thoughts with others. And if you are so much powerful that you can convince others, so that's definitely a wonderful feeling to feel. So before closing our session with the such amazing speakers and guests, I really don't want to yet finish it, but as we know, everyone has some other priorities as well. So one message, Sir Mohit, you want to share for the aspiring and emerging writers, and the same question for you, Sir Usama and Dr. Mahid. Sir, we will start from you, Sir Mahid.
Yeah, you'll start from me or Professor
Dr. Mahid.
Modat? All right, all
If
right.
you want to.
Okay, okay. So once somebody asked me what is the message that you have for young budding writers, I'm still budding myself, so I don't know. uh, but I would say just keep writing, just keep writing, and read good literary stuff that has been done in the past so that you can learn from them. And don't be cruel to yourself. You see, when I would read my work myself, I would kind of try to compare it with those legends who are actually giants of the literary world. Now, in order to go there, you have to start from somewhere, and they themselves started from where you are starting today. So it's all part of the journey. It's all part of evolution, of improving. So just keep writing, and with time, with experience, you eventually reach to the point that you're kind of aspiring to be at. And then again, just adding a few points, as Sir Modat also mentioned, and Dr. Sam as well. One of the things regarding talking about regrets of not having the genes related to poetry from my family. You see, so one of the regrets that I had was that I wanted to complete this book during the lifetime of my late grandfather, Captain Niaz Ahmed Sufi. And such is the coincidence of events that I could not complete it during his lifetime. I tried my best, but eventually it was an added responsibility on me to see this through. And today is the virtual book launch, and today is his first Bursi as well. So, I just couldn't do it in time, but this is something that we've done it. I hope he's reading the book from up there, and I'm sure he would be liking it. Still a lot to improve, anyways. And moving on to talking about the intensity of emotions and pain throughout the stories. You see, as a writer, I really struggled to create fiction out of nothing. For me, it wasn't just possible for me to take a piece of paper and pen or open up the laptop and just start writing. No, for me, it would have to be something in life that would shake me down to the very core. And for that to happen, it is very difficult. You have to expose yourself to be affected by events happening around you in real life, or that you hear or witness around you. And then to translate that intensity of emotion into words that transmit the same intensity onto the reader is something that is very difficult to get through. But I hope I've done justice with the stories that I've been able to compile. So that is about it regarding the budding writers. Just keep on writing, and eventually everybody improves with time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mahad. Sir, would you like to share true words, true sentence?
Okay. Yeah, I personally feel that writing is a huge responsibility. It's a godly pursuit. See, the greatest of story writers is the God himself. And the epitaph of Saad Hasan Manto, who to me is probably the greatest short story writers our part of the world has produced. उसके एपिटाफ पे लिखा हुआ है कि यहाँ साद हसन मंटो हजारों मन मट्टी के नीचे सो रहा है और सोच रहा है कि वो बड़ा अफसाना निगार है या खुदा. सो ये जो एक परसूट है ना स्टोरी लिखने का, ये आप एक गॉडली परसूट के तौर पर लेने की जरूरत. When you write a short story, keep in mind that you have to pursue perfection. Now, I'm not saying be perfect, and I agree with Mahad that keep writing, but you must understand that you're on a journey, that you are pursuing perfection. As the days pass, your subsequent work has to be better than the previous work. So Mahad can get away with so much, even if he did make mistakes in this book. Somebody's going to turn around and say, "Kya hua? Pehli kitab hai na?" But दूसरी किताब में people are not going to be as kind to him as they would be in his first book. So he would have to become a bigger critic of his own self in the next book, even bigger a critic than his wife in his subsequent work. So pursue perfection. You don't have to be perfect just now, but keep pursuing that perfection in your work. Secondly, there are 3 characteristics of a great short story. Short story has to be short, foremost. So the brevity of the story is the essence of a short story. Brevity. और वो brevity पूरी कहानी की डेप्थ में नहीं होती, कुछ सेंटेंसेस में भी शॉर्ट होती है. उसकी जो ब्रेविटी है ना, वो उसके हर जुमले में, एवरी सेंटेंस हैज टू बी ब्रीफ and powerful and hit you. So pursue that brevity of sentences, brevity of themes, that all link up eventually to become a short story. So that's the most important part in a short story that a writer who's pursuing or who's following the footstep of Mahad must keep in mind. Secondly, all short stories rely on uh, a very rare emotion, an emotion that is not generally around in our life. Everything is predictable. So the short story comes with a surprise in it. It suddenly takes a turn that the reader never thought it would. So if there is a short story that you have written without a surprise element in it, it is not a powerful short story. So keep in mind this this surprise component that comes out. Like the first story that he writes about the jammed guns and the mother's prayer, and uh, it hits you because of the surprise that it brings suddenly from nowhere. These two people, and he comes up and says, I'm that person that you were trying to kill on that fateful day in 1971. So that is the beauty of that element of surprise. And the last part is that when a short story finishes, the person must shut the book and go back and start to think, oh my God. If that doesn't happen, then you need to rewrite what you have written. So those are my messages to a young writer, that pursue these three phenomena when you're writing a short story. Mahad has done it. I'm sure in the subsequent books he's going to do it even better and bring these and much more lovely characteristics um, to his short stories. But that is what I would give as a message to a young budding writer who's following in the footsteps of Mahad.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing such wise wisdom, words of wisdoms, and thank you once again. Um, just one thing I would like to relate with, as we all somewhere belong to like the writing and reading. So this is my belief too, that we don't link or relate ourselves with the whole story. It doesn't matter it's a short story or a novel. We always link with moments, passages, and somewhere in between the lines, which we think somewhere is directly linking to our situation. And that's where we feel a link, a connection with the book. So it's like very much important while reading that a writer has such a power to deliver the words, and in different passages, he delivers a different message to the different people. So as we say that there can't be one single uh, favorite line or passage for everyone. You will relate and make favorite which is related to you or links to you. So thank you
Agreed.
so much, sir. I am feeling like somewhere I am in a right direction because you just seconded it and said that it's right. So thank you so much
That's so true.
for coming today. Over to you, sir Osama. Your last words.
So if I take your question from one angle, I shouldn't be giving any message because I'm not a writer. But on the other hand, I am the one who read their
You are a
stories.
writer, Thomas. Stop saying that. You're a very good writer. You know that. And if you want me to praise you, I will. But don't say that you're not a writer.
Sir, I think a critic is the best advisor because he can explain and share that where a writer should focus. So you should definitely advise us and everybody out there who is really want to write something or like to improve their writing style as well.
So, as we talked a lot about the nature or the genetic component, but the nurture components remains there. So, वो क्या चीज़ है जो एक अखबार की खबर को एक अफसाने की लाइन बना सकती है? That is your imagination. That is your hard work. So, before writing too much, you should be reading too much. Or I usually don't say a lot when Brigadier Rana is sitting, or I'm not that wise, but I usually sit with a lot of wise people, including Brigadier Rana, so I get a lot of chunks from them. So one day I was sitting with a late Bano Kutsia, and I asked her, Bano Appa, Raja Git के बाद कुछ राजा गिद्ध जैसा नहीं आया. उन्होंने मुझे कहा, बेटा अब इस कड़ी धूप में खड़ा नहीं हुआ जाता, अब वैसी चीज नहीं आ सकती. अच्छा, उस वक्त मुझे समझ नहीं आई. मैंने कहा 4 लाइनें ही लिखनी है, एक नॉवल ही लिखना है, इसके लिए कौन सी कड़ी धूप. But now I understand that kadi dhoop is required to convert that akhbar ki khabar into a short story. So these youngsters, they have to bear that kadi dhoop. They have to work that hard to bring that imagination, that connection in their work, so that that become a piece of art and is not wasted in dustbin.
That's right. I believe that as you said कि हर राइटर की एक जर्नी होती है, और जो राइटर की जर्नी होती है वही पूरा एक सफ़र होता है जहाँ पे वो खुद को बेहतर से बेहतर से बेहतर तर करता जाता है. और मैं डेफिनेटली आई एम अ वेरी मच सपोर्टर ऑफ दिस नोशन कि एवरी राइटर शुड राइट his or her biography. So because it will inspire other people that how much he struggled, and the effort is there to be a writer. People usually think that it's just a piece of cake to write something, and they just have a plenty of free time to write. So but no, it's a real effort and real struggle. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today and sharing everything and your wise words for the writers and for the readers as well. And we wish best of luck to Dr. Mahad as well. Before signing off, sir, one recital that should be a must.
All right. So the book, as I was saying, is out, but it tails. It is being dispatched to all those who pre-ordered all across the country. Um, if you ask me to recite a part of the story, so I'll recite the last story of the book. The title of the book is A Cogwheel Nonetheless, and it is basically based on a concept of somebody who wants to live on forever, and where he talks about the three deaths that every human being has to endure in his life. So without further ado, I'll just start with the recital of this book. A cogwheel nonetheless. It's grade 4 cancer, Naveed, said Dr. Durrani with a heavy heart. It was a strange irony of time. A man who had cured thousands of patients over the years was now searching for one himself. Dr. Durrani stood blank, not knowing how to condole his ailing friend, comrade, and a partner of 30 years. Meanwhile, Dr. Naveed was battling a storm within. How could he miss the signs? As conflicting thoughts raged within him, he sat still with his unblinking cold eyes as if made of stone. Isn't easy breaking bad news. It's rather impossible to share such information with someone you love. Their friendship over the years had solidified into a bond of brotherhood. Dr. Durrani now felt guilty for not having the cure for cancer. It's going to be an uphill battle. We have a few options we can explore, said Durrani as he tried to break the stony silence that had started to haunt the room. Naveed knew he was being sold hope, hope in the form of empty words. As a doctor himself, he knew he was guilty of it too. He wished he knew less. If only he knew less, the end of the tunnel might have had been a bit far for him. But he knew this is where his story ends. Time. How much time do I have? Naveed stumbled over his words. 4, maybe 6 weeks, answered Dr. Durrani. He knew false hope won't sell. As perfectionist as a surgeon Naveed was, he would never fall for delusions. They sat there for a few minutes, alone to themselves. Those minutes felt like hours as they both pondered how could it happen to them. When you treat a disease for years, you perfect the art of rooting out even the dimmest of symptoms, narrowing down the vaguest of pictures to a definitive diagnosis. One eventually starts to feel superhuman, if not divine. But life comes back at you. Time trumps everyone. Today's news was a harrowing reminder to the both of them that in the end, life is as fragile as it gets. Humans are helpless before their fate. Dr. Naveed was a charismatic personality known for his liveliness, perfectionist attitude, and never say die spirit. He projected a strange, positive aura around him. Junior doctors loved to work in his shadow as every day he inspired them to achieve something better than what they did before. A high achiever all his life, a few months back he was elected as the chairman of the Surgeons Association. It had been a couple of years since his charity organization started to build up fame, and he aimed for more considerable donations to put his aim of social upliftment into action. Just when Naveed thought he had gathered all the missing pieces to roll out his grand plan, cancer wrecked it all. Durrani pushed his wheelchair down the hall as Naveed sat lost, paralyzed by his thoughts. Money, fame, power of authority, nothing could get him what he needed most: time. Back home, the news of his diagnosis fell like thunder as if the seven skies had suddenly collapsed. Naveed had married his college sweetheart. She was smart, intelligent, and had a lively, pretty face. Even though Naveed carried weight and looked a man far above his age, his love had kept his wife young. But even she looked old today. Her fresh, glowing skin turned pale, her dark hair looked dull, and her melodious voice lifeless. His sons sat there in the lounge in a state of disbelief. Perhaps a boy's first superhero is his father. No matter what calamity falls, you know the hero always wins. But they were boys no more. They knew the superhero was not going to win this fight. Fate stood undefeated. Take me to the mountains. I want to breathe the cool, fresh, unpolluted air. I want to cherish the little time that I have, expressed Naveed as he tried to cheer his grieving family. Come on, I haven't died yet, said Naveed with a loud, lively voice as they all smiled and laughed a bit. Naveed knew how to make the most out of life. As a young couple, him and his wife would often sit under the stars, and Naveed would talk how he wanted to live on forever. Even when life was brutal, he'd say he wanted to be immortal. He wanted to live 1,000 years. His wife, for her, one life was more than enough to handle. As ambitious a man Naveed was, one life with him was enough adventure. The family packed their bags and loaded their car. They started their long, arduous voyage to Kale, a mesmerizing village in the heart of the evergreen Neelam Valley. The journey was long and the road was rocky, but Naveed, his sons, knew how to live. The long hours shrunk short as the amusing chatter made them oblivious of time. The hot summer air of the metropolitan soon started to cool as they entered the Pir Panjal range. The dull trees and shrubs were now replaced by taller, greener pines and cedrus trees. The valleys would suddenly open itself to upcoming guests and then vanish away as trees obstructed the view. As the sun shined bright, the mountains slowly pulled over a blanket of cumulus clouds as it encroached on the valley from the north. Naveed would often say that mountains teach us humility and crush our pride with their sheer size and dominating stature. The bright starry skies that shone above them made him realize how small and perhaps irrelevant he was in the vast fabric of the universe. Naveed had his way of looking at things. It's strange that when a man is close to death, he is reminded of the most bizarre of memories. Old thoughts and experiences that one wonders might have faded away with time, or may have been lost somewhere in the deep crevices of the subconscious human mind, suddenly pop out fresh as if they happened yesterday. It was 30 years ago when Naveed visited Kale as a young medical student with his friends Durrani and Kamran. Kale back then was a distant sight to visit, reserved only for the most robust and passionate of nature lovers and hitchhikers. Exhausted toward the end of their professional medical exams, Naveed and his friends packed their stuff, grabbed whatever little money they had, and ventured onto an adventure to Neelam Valley. The journey back then was not in a decent car, but on the local bus rooftops. The wind froze them to the bone as they sat exposed. Kale was as beautiful as it is today. The shades of orange and red coloring the skies, they reached Kale near sunset. They checked themselves into a local hotel and left to discover a local market called Bazari. The Bazari was small, comprising of no more than 30 shops, most of them loaded with local handicrafts. As they explored the marketplace, someone pulled Naveed's shirt from behind. He turned to see a cute 5-year-old boy standing with his feet soaked in mud, selling pens and torches. His heavy cheeks were pink, his nose runny, and a charming hand woven woolen cap sat on his head. How much is one for? Naveed asked delightfully. 10 rupees, said the little boy in a soft voice. They bought 2 torches from him and handed him a 100 rupee note to buy some sweets for himself on the way home. What happened next shocked them. The boy refused to take the money. Buy me shoes instead, he said. The mountain rocks hurt when I walk to school. It's on the other side of the mountain, narrated the little boy. Moved to the core by what the little boy said, Durrani and Naveed took him to a nearby shoe store. They bought him used shoes, one of each size available in the shop, to help him through school. He grabbed his prized gift from the 2 young strangers and ran off, disappearing into the dark end of the muddy street. Another one fooled by the cunning little boy, the shopkeeper taunted. What? Why didn't you tell us before? Durrani said in anger. They couldn't believe they had been fooled by a little boy less than half their age. They were told the boy has this strange habit of buying shoes of various sizes from every tourist in the market. He has the same story to tell, the same innocent looks to show, and a different tourist every time to con. They both walked back to their hotel. When Kamran came to know about what happened, he had a big laugh at the naivety of the two. Naveed slept miserably that night. The only relief was knowing that he did his part with a clean heart. A week passed as Naveed wandered through Kale in his car with his sons, spending most of his time in his hotel on the outskirts of the village. He would watch polo from the balcony being played on the ground beneath, sipping on green tea, which was all his diminishing appetite could afford. His wife would put a warm woolen shawl over his shoulders every time he wandered to the balcony. Naveed hated being treated like a baby. His family, who sat clueless in the lounge a week ago, was now helping Naveed enjoy his last days. They knew not that Naveed was fighting a war within. A storm of emotions rumbled inside him, wreaking havoc on his mental state every second. He was a typical type A personality. He would never take failure for an answer. His habit of aiming far beyond his capabilities had been the secret to his success in life. He pushed his boundaries every day. That same mentality that had helped him achieve so much now became a curse as he struggled to accept his failure to realize his lifelong dream. His biggest aspiration had been to catalyze a lifelong change on a mega scale, change that would outgrow itself with every generation and par itself onto a growing enterprise every year. His project for social upliftment of the poor was to go unrealized. The final step on the ladder to greatness, which he had climbed so high, would stay unsurpassed. Another week passed, and Naveed's condition started to worsen. Nausea and vomiting, controlled by medications so far, were controllable no more. His appetite, that had shrunk dramatically with every passing day, now dwindled to non existence. As she woke him in the morning and pulled the curtains aside, Naveed's wife found him in an unresponsive state. They rushed him to the nearest government hospital. Comatose, he was immediately transferred to the ICU. They were fighting a lost battle, but they fought nonetheless. Securing his IV line, they directly passed a tube down his airway and put him on the ventilator. A cocktail of drugs was attached as they loaded him with medications in a futile attempt to improve his condition. He fought well. His vitals refused to crash against all odds as the inner storm enabled him to defy death itself. He wasn't ready to die. His soul refused to leave his body without realizing its dreams. But fate always has the final say. His fight eventually waned away and his vitals dipped and suddenly crashed. The doctors did all they could, but Naveed had now breathed his last. His wife sat alone in the empty hallways of the hospital as Naveed's body was being prepared to be handed over to his family. Her sons were busy arranging for the funeral and the long journey back. Her eyes were now dry. How long can one shed tears? There comes a point when grief drains them all. All that's left is an empty soul held captive in a hollow body. She had lost her all. That night, a young doctor who had broken the sad news to her approached to condole. Dr. Shah Faisal was a young, thoughtful, and a handsome looking man. He had this strange ability to see beyond the sheer curtains of the eyes. He could see how teenage love had blossomed over the years between the two, and how suddenly time had cut short a story that wanted to go on forever. They talked about Naveed all night. She told him how they met in college and fell in love, how Naveed would share his ambitions with her, open up his vulnerable self to her, and accept how incapable he was to achieve the monstrous dreams he'd set for himself. But he did accomplish it all in the end. All that was left was this last project of his project of social upliftment of the poor. She was kind not to talk all about Naveed and herself, but asked the young man as to how he got into medicine and what his aims for the future were. How did a smart, capable man like himself ended up working in such a distant, under-resourced hospital setting? I would con tourists as a child, he said with a smile, not knowing whether to be happy or ashamed as he started narrating his tough childhood. Why? She asked as they both laughed. Our village was a pretty desolate place once, he said. Tourists would come, experience the untouched beauty of the lands, but government investment was dismal. We would walk past mountains to go to a school located in the nearby district capital. Poor and barefooted, many children would quit school because the rocky path was too painful to undertake every day. But I was determined to see us all have a better life for ourselves. I refused to let them quit school. I would walk in the marketplace barefooted every day, narrating the tale of our impossible journey to school, asking tourists to buy me shoes. I would give the shoes to my friends, and we continued going to school. With time, things changed. The government invested in health and education. More of us started to be educated and go to the mainlands for higher education. We all just wanted to escape this valley and flee to the bustling metropolitan cities of Pakistan. But there was this young man one day who changed my perspective of life. I approached him barefoot with my feet embedded in the muddy street of the main bazaar. But instead of buying me a single pair of shoes, he bought me a pair of every size. I still remember how he stressed to never give up on education and how he wanted to see me as a doctor one day. He made me question what I wanted in life. I knew all that I wanted was to give a chance to all those underprivileged around me, just like he had given me a chance. An opportunity to study all my life with a shoe of every size. So after completing medicine, I came here to work at my village hospital. A district administration officer, friend of mine, and I fund scholarships to the poor children from our charity fund, which we created with the purpose of social upliftment of the poor by providing them a chance at education. Naveed's wife heard his story with a keen interest and encouraged him to continue further with his ambitious goals. Little did they know it was Naveed who had been conned by Shah Faisal 30 years ago. The soul that had so robustly fought its fate now ascended through the skies in peace. God had written for Naveed to live his dream by a small act of kindness done decades ago. So that is the story, A Cogwheel Nonetheless. And basically the butterfly effect that one small deed has an impact way down in life.
Very powerful story. In fact,
Thank
one of my favorite stories of from the book that you just read, and I was wondering which one would you read. This there's another sentence that he writes in another short story of his that I don't know which one it is. If my memory serves me right, it says, "When would die? When would one die forever?"
The broken sword. The
Yeah,
broken sword, sir.
and that was a huge question. And the answer I would share as a parting comment for this conversation, and I pondered about that question. When I read that question, I put the book away and I started to think about when would one die forever? And the answer that came to my mind, I must share with you and our audience today, that when the last person on earth forgets you, that's when you would die forever. Thank you.
That's truly very deep, sir. But somewhere it's really a big truth. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Mahid, for writing such a wonderful one. And for the audience, please do buy this book. It's only for rupees 1,000 and available on our mirakisa.com portal. So you can go there, order your book, and enjoy reading the rest of the stories. Thank you so much for everyone for listening us and staying with us till end. Thank you. Allah
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Hafiz.
Thank you
Thank
Bye.
you,
ji.
Mark,
Bye.
for giving me the chance, and lovely talking to you, Rida. Good to see you again, Sama. Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you so much, sir. Allah Hafiz. Thank
Allah
you.
Hafiz, everyone.